All right, great. I think we're live. Hi, Lakshmi. Hi, Asir. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing the names correctly.
Yes.
Very happy to have you on
you.
this panel, and looking forward to exploring these topics. So I think before we get started, I'll just introduce myself briefly, and then maybe we go around and you guys can introduce yourself as well. So my name is Ruby Kitov. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Tufin. Tufin is a cybersecurity company that deals with reducing the complexity of network change automation. And we're the leader in this field. So we are the security policy company, and we've started 15 years ago, grew quite quickly, and went public last year in April. Took a brief moment to celebrate and got back to work, and here we are today. And today I'm going to be hosting this panel on new CISO priorities post COVID-19, and hopefully you guys will all enjoy it. So with me, I have two distinguished CISOs, and I'd like you guys to introduce yourselves. So why don't we start with Lakshmi first? Go ahead.
Hey, Ruby. Hey, Yasser. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Lakshmi Hanspal, I'm the Global CISO for Box. I want to thank Icon and our VC host today for this opportunity. It's great to be here. It's quite exciting to do this virtually as well, right? Please keep your questions and comments flowing. We'll incorporate it in the flow of our narrative.
Great. Thanks, Lakshmi. Yasser, go ahead.
Yeah, so Yasser Abdeslam, I'm the Chief Information Security Officer at Splunk. Very happy to be here, and just echo Lakshmi's comments. Please ask questions. This is a great opportunity, so thanks for the invite. Looking forward to the discussion.
Great. So let me start first by taking each of you back to around mid-March of this year. So when did you realize that things were going to shift significantly, and what was your team focused on from that point until you reached what I would call steady state? Well, why don't we start with you, Lakshmi?
So the period that you mentioned, which is around early to mid-March, was pretty interesting. For us, it was mid Q1, we were wrapping up, and we had quite a bit of acceleration going into Q2 and Q3 quarters as well. So we're pretty excited on that. The second aspect is that when did we see the shift? I think it's hard to predict. It's like the stock market. You can't really predict a bottom or a top or a peak. But I think there were some clear trends which made sense that this is going to be more longer term than a short-lived moment in our professional life. One of the accountable areas that I have within Box is business continuity, disaster recovery, crisis management, and emergency management. So I'm very close to the trends, the numbers, the feeds, and the entire set of data points that go into making decisions around those events. So when we started looking at those trends, early trends, especially in numbers, infected numbers, but also the geographical proliferation in some sense, I think it gave us an idea that this is going to be a little bit more prolonged, not the 2 weeks or 4 weeks. Yesterday, I'm sure your team thought about it in single-digit numbers of weeks, just like we did. So that was a shift in our mindset that this is going to be longer term. And then to the second part of your question, what did we do until we reached steady state? It was a couple of minor pivots is what I would say. If you think about Box as an enterprise, and we support 100,000 plus customers with similar scale of enterprise, for us, secure remote work was easy enough to pivot. So there wasn't a major shift, I have to say, for us in a corporate level, but I know that we've engaged with a number of customers for whom either A, needed deepening of their engagement with the best of breed secure remote work providers such as ourselves, but also it accelerated some of the decision making with partners and customers as well. I think of it as 3 A's. First, there was amplification of the issue. The second, there was acceleration of decisions, roadmaps, and just the acknowledgement that something needs to pivot. And the third one is apparent. It was made apparent, certain gaps that could no longer be swept under the rug were made apparent. And so this was more of a conversation around business risk and how do we make guided investments rather than anything else.
Great. Yasir?
Yeah, from our perspective, I mean, I guess the first part of your question is, when did we see the signs that this is going to be a longer term situation? I think that realization came to us when we started seeing a spreadsheet that was circulated among CISOs here in the US. And essentially that spreadsheet summarized the actions that each one of the companies that were involved was taking as a response to that current situation back in March. And it was very obvious once we started seeing the major technology companies making decisions such as, we're going to allow our employees to work from home for the next X months, in some cases for the remainder of the year. It was very obvious that this is a situation that's gonna stay with us for a while. And from that perspective, one of the teams within information security at Splunk took the initiative to perform an assessment. This is the threat intelligence team within Splunk. So they performed an assessment that essentially had as an objective to determine the threats that are going to be more important to focus on. And from that perspective, once we had those focus areas, we assessed ourselves, we assessed our controls and our security posture against those threats. Some of the things that came out of that assessment was things like impact on collaboration tools like Zoom. The other theme that was also a focus was phishing, and we can I'll share some details about the results of that assessment. And then the third one was the risk of corporate data spillage on personal devices. And so I'll talk a little bit about the first one. So the impacts on collaboration tools. Obviously, wanted to make sure that collaboration tools such as video conferencing is secure. Now that is going to be the default way by which our customers and our employees communicate. So we had to check that and make sure that everything is checks as far as protection of access, the kind of configurations that we need to put in place to make sure things like the recording of sessions is protected and so on. The second one was around phishing. So we needed to make sure that our phishing controls were up to par, both at the laptop level, but also in the back end. And the last one that I mentioned, which is the corporate data spillage on personal devices. Obviously, when employees are working from home, they are more prone to use personal devices to connect to the corporate network. So from that perspective, we had to push a number of controls and accelerate our zero trust initiative to make sure that we were able to mitigate the risk of corporate data spillage.
Great. Thanks, Yasir. And I'll just add my perspective. So we're, a little over 500 people. We obviously, a lot of people work remotely. Some people didn't work remotely. So we went through what a lot of other vendors and organizations went through, which is trying to beef up our WAN line and get everybody, on VPN. and went through, all of a sudden we had significant load on certain applications, and then started asking ourselves the question, why isn't this in the cloud? Why is this behind a firewall? Which questions that a lot of our customers are asking about their applications. And since we deal with network connectivity, our customer happens to be the network security team. And from about mid-March to, I would say, end of the first week of April, they couldn't breathe because they were just bringing connectivity up for all of their clients. In some cases, tens of thousands of people had to be brought up online very quickly. So tons of VPNs were acquired and all sorts of ways to connect remotely. I think people rushed very quickly to get things up and running. It's a question of how clean that configuration is now. So I think a lot of people are doing some cleanup. This is great. So if we go back to let's say mid-March, if you think of your initial assessment at the moment the crisis hit, and obviously change your priorities, in retrospect, what was most surprising to you about your assumptions, let's say mid-March, and what ended up actually happening?
So I would say that the duration of this event was a surprise for most of us. I think most of us had planned anywhere between 2 to 6 weeks. So that's one. The adaptation that each of us as organizations needed to go through. Ruby, you just mentioned between March and April, there was an adaptation with Tufin on VPN capacity, right? And just getting and load on applications and so on. So adaptation that each one of us needed to go to, and for the most part, how nimble and agile companies can be. So this is like the test of time moment for each one of us on adaptation and our DR planning in some way. So that was pretty good. The other aspect I would say is that from a people standpoint, and as a people leader, each one of us was probably concerned, what effect is this going to have on just sustaining steady state with people that we care about so much. And there needed to be a net new normal in how we function, expectations on how we engage. So a couple of examples I would say is that we felt that individuals should be empowered to block off time in their calendar. Hey, make 30-minute meetings, 25 minutes, get that headspace, go for a walk, wear safe, and where possible, whatever helps you keep sustained during the day. The other aspect we also saw was longer duration of work hours, right? So you start early, it's like blurring. The start and end part of the days started to blur. So from a people aspect, I was pretty concerned on will we burn ourselves out in a few weeks? And so that was pretty good. We were able to sustain even to now in engaging in virtual coffees and other aspects where we bring the teams together, given that we can't do it in a way that we had done it before. And the last I would say in terms of not necessarily a surprise, but a realization is that there are a number of companies that perhaps thought that they could never operate remote. Maybe it is not the culture, maybe it's not the ethos, and quite frankly, it's not the way we engage, for example, with customers and so on. So the realization that we can, with the right prioritization, with the right business decisions in place, but also that the great equalizer today is the world's largest work from home experiment that's going on. When this equalizer gets not so well balanced in some point, when there's some semblance of normalcy coming up next year on people coming back to the office and some staying remote, it'll be interesting to see if the camaraderie, the productivity, the engagement that we see now How do we continue to balance that even in a hybrid model?
I agree 100%, Lakshmi, and similarly have similar experience at Tufin. Go ahead, Yasser.
No, yeah, I mean, this is, I think Lakshmi pretty much hit all the points, so I'm not sure what is left out to say, but I would say there's a couple of things. We initially were worried about the impact on productivity. Is it going to be possible for our workforce to collaborate at the same level we were able to do in the context of a call it physical world setting? And fortunately, that turned out to be a wrong concern in the sense that we're able to collaborate. In fact, our productivity has kind of exponentially increased to the point where we started having concerns about our employees getting burnt out, and we had to put some kind of guardrails in place to make sure that, as Lakshmi mentioned, our employees take time between meetings, that they're able to disconnect, at a reasonable time in the afternoon, and so on. So that's some things that we had to go through, and it was somewhat of a process. It was not obvious to us from day one. The other thing that we did at the corporate level is that we have started giving days off pretty much. So we have a number of days that we added every other month, where employees can pretty much take a day off that is not necessarily connected to any kind of holiday or anything like that. That was one thing. The second thing that we've done in retrospect was a little bit over-engineered, is that we did an assessment of our BCP, our business continuity plan, and we had to make sure that if key employees were to be affected by the pandemic, we're going to still be able to continue operating in at least semi-normal fashion. So from that perspective, we did a mapping of every critical role within the company, but also, I guess in this case, in the security team, and we made sure that there is a backup for each one of those employees. And that was honestly a little bit over-engineered. It's good that we went through that process, but the even better thing is that we did not have to fall back on those plans. I think mostly every one of our employees is healthy and safe. So yeah, in retrospect, those are the two things that kind of were a little bit different from what we assumed going into this crisis.
Great, thank you. And I just want to mention, if anyone has a question, please send it in the comments, and we hope to have time at the end to answer. So I think we've we touched on some of the software topics around COVID-19, and I want to maybe bring the conversation a little bit back to security and tech. So this question is a little bit sensitive, so I'm going to ask it in the broad sense. From conversations with colleagues, what areas do you feel are ones where organizations have cut corners under emergency mode and didn't follow the regular process and policies? You want to start, Lakshmi?
I could, and Yasser, why don't you start on this one? I want to
Sure.
plus one and add to what you say.
Yeah, so I think it's the thing that I can think of, and this is not necessarily based on any one conversation that I had with my peers, but my assumption is that a lot of companies have had to accelerate the migration to the cloud. And when you do that, whether it's acceleration of adopting SaaS solutions, moving from on-prem to a SaaS solution, or migrating to a cloud platform like AWS, GCP, and so on. I think in the context of doing that in a crisis mode, I have to assume that some of the security controls would not have fallen in place in time to allow for that overnight conversion from an employee population that was working in the context of an office to one that is 100% remote, right? And I'm thinking about things like single sign-on, MFA. I find it hard to believe that if a company has to migrate everything at once all of their business systems, at least the majority, to reduce the reliance on VPN, that rollout is going to be seamless, and that it will have the security controls that will allow us to maintain the desired security posture on the cloud.
So I would say, so in terms of our Splunk environment within Box, I think that was our dashboard in blips in the radar if a control did not meet the control plane, compliance plane that we were thinking about. So it was a great sort of single pane of glass view on risks to the environment. And Ruby, to your question, some of these, as Yasser mentioned, may not have been thoughtful, deliberate decisions, right? The intention was, let's have business continuity, let's continue to enable and support our customers, and hence let's proceed in the manner that supports that. I don't believe there was ever an intent, by any company that says we will thoughtful and deliberately sort of cut the corners, right? That's why I've never encountered that in my conversation. Some of it has been, we intended to do this and looks like we didn't think about it from end to end. We didn't think about the last mile, the first mile. But I want to give a little bit of another perspective. It's not so much as cutting corners, it's about looking at companies reevaluating their risk appetite. The triggers that we faced in our current environment needed a relook into what is our risk appetite now. For some companies, it has gotten higher. We are able to take a little bit more risk and to drive whatever the reason may be for that. And for many, it has gone lower. So the threshold, so the appetite is much lower to assume more risk at this time, right? So there needed to be a revisit and review of where is our risk appetite now, and go revisit some of the business decisions that we have in place. I can give you a very simple example that I think applies to most of us. Loss of clean room facilities for customer support. Right. So how does customer support work in most of our organizations? They have supervisory oversight. They don't bring in recording devices. They have a clean room, and the activities are monitored, not just from a logging access perspective. I'm just saying from a physical presence perspective as well. But we needed to enable customer support in again, the world's largest work from home experiment. So when you have the loss of clean room facilities in that way, you needed to go and relook at the business decisions, right? So maybe a decision was that we will no longer accept credit card or funding instrument changes over the phone because you lost the secure line. But there are many other secure channels to do the same thing, right? The phone aspect would not be one of them. Right? So there needed to be adjustment. Again, coming back to adaptation. Adaptation of business decisions is one. It's not so much cutting corners. It's about realizing where is our risk appetite now. So what are the business decisions that we need to go relook and then pivot to?
Great. And what I meant by cutting corners, I didn't mean going against policy. I think some organizations, they use emergency mode, and with emergency mode, you don't go through 5 layers of approval. You can do anything you want. CEO says do it now, and you're doing it. So I think I've seen some organizations that have gone through that. Some of our customers. So
and I think we have in some flavors. For example, I can think of instances where if we needed to make a decision on our Japan office or another geolocation, if we had a COVID council and the council had myself, CIO, general counsel, COO, and representatives, HR, people operations, people officer, and so on. And it was an accelerated path to get to those decisions quickly, as you said, right? So if we needed to have like office shutdowns, we're level 1, level 2, level 3, different, geolocations, it helped to accelerate some of those decisions. And that is now captured as a standard operating procedure for us. I think the good thing about the paths that were discovered to get to those decisions early or to those engagements early should translate into standard operating procedures and be part of tabletop and other BCDR exercises we do. At least that was a takeaway for us, and we've adopted that as a lesson learned.
Thank you. So unfortunately, I think our time has run out. It's 25 minutes, and I have a list of questions, and we also have one question in the comment section, but I think we have to wrap it up. So I want to thank you again, Lakshmi and Yasir, for participating, taking your time, and everybody that joined us. Hopefully, you guys that came on board gained some insight into how security is managed at a couple of the world's most successful companies. And I certainly enjoyed it. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Have a great day. Thank you. Bye-bye.